Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. And as a result of Keir Starmer's reorganisation of 10 Downing Street, he has given his new chief fixer, Darren Jones, three key priorities for the head of government to focus on in terms of domestic policy: the cost of living, the NHS, and immigration. And these are certainly the top three areas which will determine Labour's fortunes at the next election. But it's the immigration pillar where Labour have thus far shown signs of trying to jam a square peg into a round hole. In this video, I'd like to discuss Labour's approach to asylum accommodation specifically, from a strategic point of view, as well as where the controversies will come. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So, immigration in general, after the 2022 and 2023 post-Brexit surge, something that Nigel Farage both predicted and is on record as having approved on, until it suited him politically to attack it, created a number of problems in British politics. First, it allowed these slippery opportunists in Reform UK to finally start building some support in the polls. They were nowhere before then. This is because the sheer scale of the immigration numbers scared the pants off a lot of the public, and then Nigel Farage went, boats, boats. Problem is, the public aren't aware that the situation is changed. See, the numbers at the time were very alarming and therefore newsworthy, so they were all over the news. But massive reductions in the numbers, well, that's not newsworthy. So the general public got told very loudly about the surge, not so much about the subsequent drop, meaning they still think the surge is in operation. But when it comes to immigration, the number one factor which is causing such anguish is asylum, despite the fact that the scale of this has been massively blown out of proportion. Like I said, it was instantly linked by Reform UK, the small boats issue, to that explosion in immigration numbers, even though the two had nothing to do with each other. But perception is everything in politics, and you have to contend with that. And there are two very visible signs of the problem which Labour really ought to tackle in order to deprive Reform UK of fuel. The first are the channel crossings. If they didn't happen, as they didn't a few years ago, no visible problem, right? But the government have no serious plans to tackle the problem. Oh, they say they do, but they don't. Disappointingly, they intend to allow Farage to make political gain from this at the next election. But the other is asylum accommodation, so the asylum seekers in Britain. Obviously, the use of hotels has been unpopular from the start, and the Tories were absolutely mad to deliberately create the problem when it didn't need to exist in the first place. They just basically created a problem deliberately, which meant they lost a load of votes to everyone else. Mental. Labour are now having to eliminate the use of hotels in this way. Nobody approves of it. It's not a suitable place to house asylum seekers who may well have very complex needs. It creates a concentrated rallying point for anti-asylum types, and it funnels vast sums of public money, literally billions, into the pockets of the Tories who got their mates in government to give them the very lucrative contracts. It's a lose-lose-lose situation. So what to do? Well, had the problem never been artificially created by the Tories in the first place, they would be housed as normal. Those with funds or family links would sort out their own accommodation. Others would have housing sourced by the state in the same way UK citizens in need get help as well, despite what Reform UK say. But now that the issue of asylum accommodation has been made such a big issue, all that would happen is that Reform UK and their ilk would switch from complaining about hotels to complaining about regular housing being denied British citizens, even though this would not be true. So here is the problem for the government. Come the next election, they can't be housed in private hotels. Some probably could be housed by local authorities, but not as many as are needed. So what to do? The obvious answer is some form of migrant village, which is not a literal village, and the government aren't really calling it this as far as I can tell, but basically suitable accommodation that exists outside of established communities, but none of that North Sea barge nonsense, which is basically a floating prison. So how is this intended to work, and what are the pitfalls? Well, the new plan's quite simple. Squeeze all those dispersed hotel residents into a handful of government-owned sites, like former military bases, things like that, old immigration removal centres even. Erect modular housing, surround it with fencing, and call it designated accommodation. It's not just about cutting costs, although it would do that. It's a key part of the government's broader strategy to restore control over the immigration system, or in reality, the appearance of control, because there's already control. Officials insist it's not a camp. We're not talking about the sort of concentration camp that Reform UK have openly proposed. See, they want migrant accommodation to not just be isolated, but deliberately unpleasant. It's all part of the usual populist shtick of, we're not going to make your lives better, but we will promise to shit on people that aren't you. One site could hold like thousands of people, 3,000 people, say. It'll cost a third of housing them in hotels, and it can be dismantled the moment the headlines move on. You know, the first pilot basically opened up at RAF Wethersfield in Essex, having already been identified by the previous Conservative government. By the end of this year, I think they're expected to be like 7 more. But here's the part ministers don't put in the press release. See, these villagers double as a backdoor way of enforcing the new 10-year route to settlement. See, live lawfully for a decade, pay national insurance, speak fluent English, stay out of trouble, and then, only then, do you get a passport. That is the appeal to, like, the UK citizenry. Oh, we're not going to make it easy to get UK citizenship. Even though no one has a problem with that. Like, no one expressed any issue with the path to UK citizenship. But anyway, this new contribution-based model fundamentally reshapes the path to settlement. It makes it longer and a more arduous journey, doesn't it? It means migrants intending on staying in Britain for the long term will have to pay more in taxes. Remember, non-UK citizens pay the NHS surcharge, which is an extra tax on top of everything else. 2 people, one's non-UK citizen, one's a UK citizen. They both do the same job, earn the same money. The non-UK citizen pays extra taxes, and it's thousands a year more to fund the NHS. The extended citizenship route basically means having to pay that extra tax for potentially twice as long. And one worry where these asylum villages are concerned is it's like park people in remote sites where they can't legally work for 6 months because you're not allowed to work until asylum claims are approved. And the clock on those 10 years doesn't even start until you can work, right? Every month spent waiting for an asylum decision is a month the Treasury isn't on the hook for benefits, NHS surcharges or school places. So it's almost then like the Treasury has a financial inducement to not deal with the asylum claims quickly. So that's one worry. These migrant villages aren't just a way of solving an understandable political problem. There's a risk they are used cynically to artificially make the process of immigration more challenging. At Wethersfield, you know, you see apparently there's like, I think it's 2,000 person dormitory town there, dropped close to a village of 400 people. So the local post office, I gather, stocks plenty of phone cards. The village hall runs English classes on a Tuesday night, I think, because the nearest city is like an hour away. And this sudden influx into like a rural community inevitably strains local infrastructure from healthcare to public transport. Migrants report that the food is better than in the hotels, but the isolation is quite tough. But I suppose that the more remote location means it's less likely that fake patriots will bother to make much of a fuss. Too much effort to get out there. The National Audit Office predicts the village programme will save at least $1 billion a year by 28-29, but the real prize for the government, they say, is deterrence. Now, governments around Europe are finding asylum such a thorny distraction that they'd really rather people didn't try to claim asylum at all and be someone else's problem. So that has shifted them from, yes, complying with international law, but at the same time trying to make the process of applying for asylum as uncomfortable as possible because it's too much of a political problem for them. Ministers claim pictures of barbed wire encampments circulating on Facebook deter both economic migrants and people smugglers. We know this isn't true, of course. Just as with the Tories, it's thinking based on the premise that these people are shopping around for the most comfortable destination rather than fleeing for their lives. I don't believe there will be a deterrence dividend here. But one dividend we may be able to measure is the political dividend. See, every time a hotel closes, a Labour minister is inevitably going to organise a press event to publicise the fact. As this happens over the next couple of years, will there be polling evidence of the issue becoming less important to key voters because they think the government has it in hand? Give you an example. The issue of the NHS, it's a top issue for a lot of voters, but it's a much considers a much less important issue now than it was a year ago. Why? Because voters sort of think Labour have got it in hand. People generally believe that Labour are good with the NHS. So it's like, okay, the experts are in charge now. We don't have to worry about that as much. Will we see a similar thing with immigration? Will immigration and asylum drop down because people have more confidence in the way Labour are approaching it? We will see. But will these migrant villages cater for the needs of the vulnerable people housed in them? Charities are warning that the sites echo the old direct provision system in Ireland, warehousing people for years, mental health rates plummeting, self-harm rising. The government has said that each village has a health centre, trauma counsellors, a bus to the nearest job centre. But what no one's really saying is that once you're inside, you can't choose to leave. I mean, that's the basic point of it. You've got bail-style conditions applying. I mean, migrants should be safe there, but not free. It's like a prison in many respects. If you are genuinely in need of asylum, then there's an argument this won't be so bad as long as you're not there under these conditions for an excessive period of time. Would the government, for example, if they can take the sting out the issue of asylum accommodation, work on ways to make sure people are only housed there for so long? If the asylum process is dragging on, then those who've been housed there for, above some time limit are moved into community accommodation to avoid serious mental health problems developing or worsening. There's no sign that this is the plan at the moment, unless I've missed something. There's a lot of scope for this idea if done right. It's basically nationalised asylum accommodation, which doesn't hit local government finances. It also means you can provide efficient education to integrate asylum seekers to both English language and cultural norms. It removes the easy targets for protest and therefore removes a big visible sign of an immigration system out of control, which is the main concern that a lot of people have. At a stroke, you close the hotels down. There's no transfer into council housing. You can make sure language skills are developed. You can educate people about how we expect people to behave in British society, that integration they're always talking about. But because they're not really villages, but more like prisons in structure, you can't keep people there for too long. So either the claims processors need to work quickly enough to keep on top of things, or you need a system of moving people out after a certain period of time. What we need to avoid is the government seeing the solution as purely anti-reform and not considering the human beings for whom this accommodation needs to be centred. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.